And welcome in to the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater alongside Richard De La Cruz.
Hello.
And Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Hello.
It is Monday, June 3rd, 2024. Go to patreon.com/the Gaming Discourse. $247, $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, more stuff like that. Latest video is a video about Lies Beneath, a 2020 VR horror game that is really good. I reviewed it back in the day, and I wanted to go back to it and talk a little bit more about it, analyze its themes and stuff like that. So give that a watch if you haven't at youtube.com/the Gaming Discourse. Working on some new content right now. Richard, you gave it an 8 out of 10 in your review of my review, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, down from the 10 out of 10 for the original review.
Okay, yeah, you're like the sequel, not quite as good as your original take on Lies Beneath. The sequel, it's sort of like the sequel. My Lies Beneath second video, is sort of like Return of the Jedi. Good.
It was shallow and pedantic.
Oh, God damn! All right, that seems a little 8 out of 10 seems a little high.
It was
now.
Redundant.
You're like just thesaurus.com. Like, what other insults are there on here? It was fallacious. Okay, well, I'm sorry, Richard. Okay.
No, that's all right. What lied beneath, though?
Well, a lot of stuff. It's a metaphor.
No.
I thought you watched the video.
He watched it, but he didn't observe it. Didn't retain any information.
Just like everyone else who watches anything online, like they watched it, but they didn't. There's no media literacy behind it. Yeah.
Nothing was learned from it.
Okay, so we've got news that we're going to talk about. Lars Wingefors, who I that's my best pronunciation.
We've said his name before.
Yeah, and I tried to look up a pronunciation last time because every time before that it was like Lars Wings of Liberty Force. I don't know. But anyway, so we'll talk about that. Richard, why don't you get into what games you've been playing? Start there.
So I guess I'll just start out with the big thing is I got my Steam Deck in finally.
Yay!
So it was a week and a day after I ordered it before I got it in. But of course I understand it was a holiday weekend. You know, I kind of ordered it late in the week. Totally understandable. But I haven't done anything quite major on it. I've kind of just been really fiddling with the thing, kind of getting
There's a lot
to
of
learn
you
the
can do.
console. Yeah. And that's kind of also sparked this, like, maybe I should learn Linux. Like that, like,
no.
right.
Yeah.
Rich is going to become that guy.
Yeah. Well, if Windows keeps going the way that they're going, but
that's fair.
I've been learning how to, like, you know, put the emulators on it, what types of emulators I want on it. I'm trying to kind of strike this balance of what I want my Steam Deck to have and what I want it to do. Of course, I've downloaded a couple games that are a little more graphical intensive so that I can kind of test out that front. And I've also been getting tripped up at their designations of what works and what doesn't. On the Steam Deck.
Oh, okay.
Because there is, when I go to some of my games on my PC and I look at, like, the Steam Deck verification, it's like, yeah, you're good to go. This game works. But when you look at it on the Steam Deck, it has the yellow information. There's like a little yellow symbol that's kind of like a cautionary, like, wait a minute. And so when you check the details, it's like, yeah, the text might be small. Everything else is fine though. It's like, well, that's not really that big of a deal. Like, come on, guys. So I've done a lot of smaller stuff, nothing crazy. I do have, like, Fallout New Vegas on there. I haven't tried it yet, but I do hear it runs well. I have like my JoJo fighting game on there and a couple others, but I have been playing, of course, the best game to play on a Steam Deck, which is what you buy it for. It's Vampire Survivors.
Nice, there you go.
Of course.
Welcome to the future.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so different. But I did download the new DLC for Vampire Survivors, which is a crossover
with Contra?
With Contra, yes, the old Konami game Contra, which I played a lot growing up. I don't play a lot of the newer versions of Contra, but I did play the older ones. And in crossover fashion, they have a whole new level Contra themed based off some of the, like, areas in a couple of the games. You kind of start out in like the first level of the first game, and then it kind of, like, grows into, like, a destroyed city, which is very reminiscent of the third Contra game on the Super Nintendo. A lot of the enemies that come at you are all different enemies from the series, which is all just a nostalgia bomb, and it works for me because, of course, as somebody who played it growing up, it's that fun, like, oh my god, it's that thing, you know.
Sure,
and
yeah.
and it keeps going and it keeps going. And so if you never play Vampire Survivors, which would be weird, if you've never played Vampire Survivors, at the end of 30 minutes, usually what happens, depending on most of the levels that you play, death basically comes at you immediately and kills you. Yep. Yeah. That doesn't mean game over. It means you beat the level, but you can beat him, and that's a whole other thing. But about, I think, 3 minutes before I hit the 30-minute mark, I got a notification. It was kind of a futuristic sci-fi like banner that popped up on the bottom, very Contra-esque, and it was like an alien something on the map is there, so you have to like go see what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went over there, and it was inside of a building, which you can go in and out of buildings now in Vampire Survivors, and it's kind of this.
Okay.
So it's a building, or it's a building on the onset, but if you go through the door, the like top kind of goes transparent, and then you can see what's in it. So I mean, you're going in a building, you're not really going, but you go into the building, and you go into a portal, and the portal takes you, and this is where I like screamed proverbially, but it takes you to a boss room of the boss from a very, very recognizable boss from Super Contra on the Super Nintendo, which was this huge metal skeleton that in the game, it's a octagonal kind of room, and you can climb up it and go around, but he bursts through the back wall and like splits it open and then like pops out and then starts like shooting at you and stuff. And he's there and he pops out and everything. And I was totally taken by surprise, and I was very, very happy that they like included that reference. But you even play the level the same. You can go around and then drop down, because he has a move that he like spins around and gets all of you. But I beat him, and it did this creepy, you know, so there's a couple points. I don't know how long you've played Vampire Survivors.
Fairly long. I don't know.
So did you do the cathedral level?
I don't.
It's kind of in the sky. It's like in the sky.
Is that the one that it's like north and south? It's kind of skinny.
It's after that. It's an actual like church cathedral.
Is that the one where it's like a hallway and something? There's a level where something is chasing after you or something, and you have to run down this like long hallway, long ways relative to the screen.
That's at the end of the level, I think, and it's like in the sky, kind of.
I think I know what you're talking about.
So that part, I don't know how you ever felt about it, but we never talked about it. But that part was kind of a little creepy, because the way that it kind of like messed with the visuals of the game and like what it went into. So when you beat the boss, a gray death comes in and like, no, I'm sorry, it keeps zooming in on the skull's face, because when you beat the boss on Contra, the doors close because he can't hold it open anymore, cuts his head off, and it lands on the floor. So when it does that, it keeps zooming in on his head, and it's kind of this like, because last time something happened like that in Vampire Survivors, like it was kind of creepy. So I kind of like was like, what's gonna happen? But like a gray skeleton just kind of like hovers over him, and then it does something, and you just get an immediate game over. You beat the level, but it's game over. But I was very happy with that level. I unlocked one of the Contra guys, which I haven't been able to play as him. And I think there might be another Contra level, but it's a very nice little crossover that I enjoyed, but also a weird one considering.
Yeah, they're kind of different contexts, but
Same
Vampire
company,
Survivors Vampire Survivors is weird and silly and funny, and
the obvious crossover is not there. So that's all. But I think Vampire Survivors is the thing I've been playing most.
Wait, isn't there a Castlevania DLC?
No.
Why am I thinking that there was something Castlevania related?
V Rising has a Castlevania crossover.
Oh,
and Dead Cells and V Rising.
Dead Cell. Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Okay, yeah, because the game is clearly very clearly Castlevania. Yes. That's funny. Do you know the voice actor Pro ZD? I don't know his real name.
Sung Wong.
Yeah, and he was in God of War Ragnarok, been a bunch of stuff. But he really did a video on Vampire Survivors that I think was so perfectly like summed up.
Yeah.
I get a Bible and I kill this guy and I get another Bible.
Yeah.
And like 2 minutes go by and he's like, wait a second. And that's when it clicks. Yes. And then like it smash cuts to him like has all these weapons and he's knocking out all these enemies.
Yeah,
so great.
blast.
So great. Okay. Connor?
My partner picked up Baldur's Gate 3, so we've just been, or picked it up on PC, so we've just been going through testing mods, making sure load order works, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Other than that, nothing really.
Yeah, I really haven't been playing anything new for recreation, but except for Baldur's Gate 3, which the second playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 is a lot easier this time around, because there are ambushes that I'm like, okay, I know this ambush is going to happen here. So, and I know like what enemies I'm about to fight. So I'm a little bit more prepared for that. Half the battle in Baldur's Gate 3, because in Baldur's Gate 3, you fight so many enemies once. There's tons of these little like handcrafted fights against a specific enemy that you never ever see again.
Okay.
There's these cats. What are the cats called, Connor, that are allergic or whatever to magic? And if you hit them with magic, Grimishkas or something like that. There's one place in the game that I know of where you fight if you open a door without checking, there's a room full of these Grimishka things,
doom,
which are not difficult to fight, but if you hit one with any kind of magic, they have a random effect, so things can like go out of control
very
really
quickly,
easily.
yeah.
And that's the only time you fight them. And there's a bunch of places in the game where you fight enemies that have like specific weaknesses or strengths, and you just fight that enemy once and you never see that enemy again. And so once you know what to expect, it becomes much easier. Also, it becomes easier because you know the game so much better. You know, you remember spells, you remember attacks, you remember your passives. First time I went through, I didn't know that there's a passive to attack with non-lethal attacks. And so there was a bunch of times where I was trying to avoid fights because I didn't want to kill the people, until I realized, oh, you could just turn on passive attacks and knock everybody out, and it's no big deal. So that has made things way easier. But I think what's interesting about, because there is so much stuff in Baldur's Gate 3. It's insane. There's so much you can miss. They've added things since the game released. So Richard, I don't know if you're planning on starting it sometime this summer.
Yes, I am.
But like, you're getting in a good spot, because they have their next big update's not till September, but that's like evil endings, and that's official mod support on PC.
Okay.
So I don't think they're doing anything where it's like fixing massive bugs or anything like that.
Got it.
But right now the game is in really good shape, runs really well. This is kind of what I was hoping it was like first time around. I get to spots where I ran into really bad bugs first time around, and it's like I'm all terrified that I'm gonna trigger it again. Haven't yet, so that's good. But I'm curious about like somebody's first time playing Baldur's Gate 3, because I wanted to play it by myself. I wanted to I didn't want to look up builds for classes. I kind of wanted to figure out all the classes myself and work it all on my own. Mm-hmm. Second time through, though, I'm a little more laid back when it comes to guides and like finding different ways to do things that I hadn't thought of before. Also, when it comes to like the morality of certain things, because my character is not evil, but there are things you can do. There are characters in the game that are evil characters that you can associate with, and it adds another dynamic to the game that is not there if you decide to like fight and kill these characters relatively early on. So I have done that just to see a bunch of new content and whatnot. But like, yeah, I've been wondering, like, for you specifically, Richard, it's like, is it better, and I guess anybody starting the game to begin with, is it better to follow guides, or is it better to go in completely blind? Because if you go in blind, no matter what you do, no matter how like persistent and how like aware you are, you're gonna miss a ton of content because there's just so much stuff that I missed the first time that I either wasn't there or I have no idea how I missed it.
That's so tough, and that is something that is a huge conversation that branches off so many, like, because so many people are so different. But it's like, for instance, like Witcher 3, for as much as I've played, I don't recall ever using any guides. I kind of just went in and not that I think you need to use a guide ton, but when my wife played it, and she played more than me, she's at the end of the game and she still hasn't finished it because she already, like, she was so anxious about making the right decision at the end that she just looked all of them up. Yeah. But even then, she still can't decide which one she feels is best. And I'm not saying that's like doing a disservice, but like with something like Baldur's Gate, whenever I get to it, I don't plan on using a guide because it's one of those instances to where my choices are my choices. Sure, yeah. Especially with something that's so heavily leaned on that. Yes, your choices matter hugely in Baldur's Gate 3. But I do think that when it comes time to like finding specific items or finding things, like I would turn to a guide for that. But I would immediately, as soon as I like found the answer, be like, okay, that's it. No more guide, you know? Yeah. But I know that there are some who love to follow the guide and some who would love to like know all the choices before they make them. And that's fine if you want to play that game. Like I play JRPGs on story mode because I don't want to grind or anything, and I play games on easy if I don't want to, deal with all of that. But I would be remiss to say that like you do miss a little bit of something if you do look up guides, because there could be those moments that come out of left field and just totally surprise you, that if you look at a guide, it kind of just makes things not necessarily fall apart, but the impact has been diminished. Yeah, and it also presents the game. Again, you can play however you want. I'm not saying that there's a correct way to play Baldur's Gate 3, and I think Larian would disagree with me if I said that. But it does present the game in a certain light that I don't think it is intended. Because Baldur's Gate 3 is not like, I don't know, in The Witcher, for example, if you don't do a quest or you do a quest wrong or something, you will fail that quest, and it says quest failed, right? So that is communicating, and there are other RPGs, there are other games like that is communicating to the player that you failed this thing. You did not. As opposed to, I don't know, when we talk about stories or anything like that, we never say it's just part of a continuum. So in Baldur's Gate 3, if you decide not to do something or you kill a character instead of talking with the character, it won't say quest failed in your journal. It'll just say we killed so-and-so instead of talking with them, as though that was just the decision you made. Right. It's not that you failed that quest. This is how you ended the quest. Like, it's neutral, right? Yeah. And that's part of like Baldur's Gate, and Larian did the same thing with Divinity 2. It's like an organic way of delivering its narrative to you, and that is a part of how you make your choices. So if you decide not to do something that's a big deal, it's not like the game is going to say you failed to do this. It's just going to say, well, you decided to do this and this happened. Yeah. And that's just how it happened. It's not that you made a bad choice. It's just that it's not that you were evil when you made that choice. Yeah. It's just that's the result of a choice that you made. And that's so cool, because that is breaking that line of the not comparison, but the similarities between like real life and D&D. It's just like, yes, the world keeps going. The life keeps going because there's no stop. And I think that's just that's so awesome, instead of just having a finite end to something. That's very cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's awesome. And so that's the thing, like when I'm thinking about following guides, because there are massive chunks of content. I'm talking when I'm all said and done with this run,
it'll probably be a little over 100 hours, and no exaggeration, somewhere between 20 and 30 hours of that is going to be stuff that I missed. Now, part of it is also going to be fights that took me a long time the first time. I was ready for, so they weren't as challenging, so I got through them quicker. So there's that. But like, there are huge chunks of content that I missed because I decided to do a certain thing and didn't realize it was going to cut off something else or whatever.
Right.
But so that's the kind, and then there's the debate about how much needs to be communicated to the player, what is an adequate amount of communication and stuff like that, which I think is all really interesting. I think Larry and pretty much the entire game does a really good job with that. But yeah, so do you know what class? Sorry, I just want to talk Baldur's.
No, that's fine.
I'm just gonna get up and go play now. You guys can carry the podcast.
All right, see you later.
That's fine.
Do you know what class you're gonna play?
I have no clue, man. I might.
You've played D&D before.
Yes.
Do you have a class you prefer?
The last class I played was Monk, and
Nice.
and I did like it, but I really felt that I didn't get to even explore like my Monk class, because I felt like I was never in any situations that I could use my talents like as a monk in, and so I felt like there was a missed opportunity there during my D&D campaign, and so I thought about doing Monk again in Baldur's Gate so that I possibly could get that experience. But I've also never dipped my toe into any sort of magic usage in D&D either, because my first campaign I was a thief.
Okay.
I normally am. So I haven't even thought about that. I feel like I'm going to start it up, and whatever I'm just like kind of feeling at that moment, I'm gonna go into. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice.
Because going about it that way, I think would provide probably more of an entertainment than, well, unless you decide you don't like that class. Yeah. Which
you can respec.
Oh, can you? Okay.
As long as you make a certain. See, this is the thing.
Oh shit.
That you have the ability to respec.
Yeah.
There is the ability to respec, and it's fairly easy. It's not super expensive, but you can miss that. That's one of the things in the game. It's early on. It's an obvious side quest.
Yeah.
But if you decide not to follow that side quest, or you forget about it or whatever, you can miss out on that ability. As far as I know, I don't think you will, because it's something that I don't know. To me, it's almost unmissable, but we don't have to go there. Okay, so Ray Parker Jr., let me tell you something about monks. Monking makes me feel good.
Like okay. I was like the guy who sang Ghostbusters, right? Yeah.
So monks are I'm a D&D expert now because I have a billion hours of Baldur's Gate 3. I'm kidding. No. I'm Baldur's Gate 3 expert, maybe. Not really. But monks are sort of a mix of a fighter and a rogue in a sense.
Okay.
Because you're a frontline fighter. Your best attacks, if depending on how you level up your character, are going to be unarmed attacks. So you can carry a weapon, but you all of your like special attacks are unarmed attacks, and you can stun enemies, you can push them back and stuff like that. All that's great. But you also have a pretty high dex score, and because of that, you can do things that like rogues can do, where you can spot traps or you can disarm traps. Now, the rogue that you could get, Astarion. He's always, because he's a main rogue, and you could change it, but for the most part, he's gonna be the best guy at like disarming traps or opening chests or unlocking doors or whatever. But if you're a monk, the benefit of the monk is that you don't have to have that in your party, because the monk can already do that pretty well. Right. So you don't have to like, oh, do I need a rogue to spot traps or disarm traps? Because the monk can do it. Not as good as Astarion can. Yeah. If you level up Astarion a certain way, but monk can still be pretty good at it. Okay. But I will say that so all the companions in the game, I think, maybe except for one, maybe two, I don't know, a ton of them are missable. Like if you find them on the road and you're like, big gulps, huh? All right, well, see you later.
We'll see you later.
Like, they will not be a part of your party if you don't talk to them, right?
Right.
Like, so that's one of the neat things about the game, is you kind of have to, but they're obvious because you see them on the loading screen and stuff. So as soon as you spot one, you're gonna be like, oh, hey, you're my best friend.
Hey, you're that guy from that thing.
You're the guy from the loading screen. You want to camp him, you know? But there's Asterion, who is a rogue. You'll find Gale, who is a wizard. Is this spoiler territory?
No.
Okay.
I know like probably like 5 of them.
Okay, so I would say I was a sorceress, I guess, in my first playthrough. Having 2 sorcerers in a party of 4 can be tricky, because then depending on how you set up your sorcerer, you have 2. When you get higher levels, the sorcerer is like you're just calling down the moon to smash things. It's insane how powerful you get. But early on, it can be tricky because you have low ACs, you don't have a ton of health, so you kind of need you're squishy, so you kind of need fighters to help tank enemies or whatever. Yeah. So what that turns your party into is like a not unbalanced, but it's really heavy on both sides, because you got 2 spellcasters and then you're gonna need 2. You know, if you have a cleric with you, if you have Shadowheart, who's the cleric, she has a bunch of utility spells which are really nice. But she's not always dealing a ton of damage, so that's going to leave the damage and the fighting to like one frontline fighter character. It's not impossible, totally doable. I think the most played class was the sorcerer. It's a ton of fun because there's all kinds of spells you can use for the sorcerer and all kinds of attacks and stuff. Magic missile is very nice because it never misses. But monk, it was funny because I have one of my main attacks right now for monk is the attack does between 28 and 50 damage.
Wow.
That's what I have my attack set at, right? And I have there's a bunch of reasons. I took a feat that like scaled something. I found something that increased my strength to like 19. And I took a feat called Tavern Brawler, which rolls your strength modifier twice for an attack, and that's including everything else. So I'm doing a ton of damage. But I just thought of that scene from Castaway, Tom Hanks. Yeah. Look at what I have created. Like that 28 to 50 attack. That thing, yeah. But the monk is super powerful. I don't think there's an attack. Sorry, I'm just going to talk Baldur's Gate 3 for another hour. There's an attack where you stun time, so it's fine. You stun enemies. They have to roll against it. But if you hit them right, they'll stun.
Yes.
And you can attack twice with a monk. So in the middle of, as soon as combat starts, you can run up to 2 enemies, straight up Austin Powers, judo chop both of them, and they're both stunned for their next turn. And let me tell you something, stunning 2 enemies right off the bat in the middle of combat, especially if you're stunning a boss, is just
pretty nice, I bet.
It's especially when it's a boss you fought in a previous playthrough and a boss that pissed you off. So now you're like, not this time, you son of a bitch, and you just stun them right there. That
is really great because like D&D instances are very much you have to make the right choices. Yeah. Not always, but the large majority of the time is like you need to understand what you're doing before you do it. Yeah. Especially if you make any big moves. So.
But you can respec. So if you ever level up your character and you're like, what the hell am I doing? I played as a monk, but I took like Warcaster, but I don't do any spells. What the hell am I doing? You can always just respec it. It's not that expensive. It's like 100 gold or something like that. Yeah,
in this economy?
Well, the Baldur's Gate 3 economies, inflation hasn't reached the same levels yet. You can still sell a sword for like 26 gold or something, but
100 gold is still 100 silver is still 1 gold, right?
Yeah, you don't have to worry about silver. Thank God, in Baldur's Gate 3. But I will say this: I really appreciate, because Larian's RPGs remind me of BioWare RPGs, in the sense that you have like you don't play as a party, you play as 4 people in a party, right? So it is not impossible to play as 4 sorcerers. It would just be difficult, but I don't think it's necessarily impossible. Mm-hmm. But in something like Pillars of Eternity, you have to have a certain composition. You have to have your fighters and your casters, and then you also have to walk in formation like a tank. Because if you turn a corner and there's an enemy there, you want the enemy to stick to your fighters. Right. In Pillars, because if they get to your sorcerer, all your heals are gone and they're going to kill you in like 2 shots, because sorcerers are super squishy. Yeah. So that's like old school Baldur's Gate, where you're creeping around a dungeon and it's like you try and turn like a tank, where your fighters are always like your frontal armor, and that's how you kind of sneak around. Where Baldur's Gate 3, it's more like BioWare, where you kind of 4 characters and you just kind of run around. and you'll spot an enemy in the distance, and that's when you split your party and you kind of position them in different places.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited to see your reaction to Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah. Second time around, it's so much better. I'm like picking up on story threads that I completely missed the first time. A lot of other things make a lot more sense. Things that I like, what was this? What did this happen? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why. And yeah, there's a bunch of side content that I just completely whiffed that I'm finding now, and I just can't believe that there's that much stuff. So yeah, I'm stoked.
Soon.
I'm stoked.
I hope.
I may hop in co-op every now and then.
Oh yeah, that's right. I always forget there's co-op on that game.
Yeah, and that's a huge aspect of Valerian games. Divinity 2 had the Game Master mode, where you could build scenarios or whatever and have players run through it.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I didn't play it very much, but okay. I'm sorry for talking about Baldur's Gate 3 so much.
It's a good game.
It's an incredible game. One more thing. I'm sorry. You know what? Actually, I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about that next week. Okay, I'm going to hit the ad, and then we're going to get to the news. Here we go. Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server.
If you want me to open that on air, then we need to state at the beginning of every episode that this episode is sponsored by Monster. Okay?
No, fuck Monster. I don't want to hear that shit.
I agree.
Okay? I don't want to hear that America needs to be reconnected, Sam, because America reconnection, Sam. Meanwhile, he's like, I can't hear you because I've got 8,000 calories of Monster filling up my eardrums, so I'm sorry. Whatever. What was her
Now, excuse me while I head off to Mexico for the sequel.
Oh, God. Wait, I thought they were going to the UK.
I don't know.
And it was like, should we have Connect? It doesn't matter. DS2 coming soon, everybody. Okay.
Let's go.
GamesIndustry.biz interviewed Lars Wingefors, who is the CEO of Embracer. That is my best pronunciation. I apologize to everybody in every other country that's not the United States, because I'm sure everybody else knows how to pronounce other names.
Yeah, probably.
Except for us stupid Americans. Lars Wingefors talked about a lot of different topics. There are two quotes here that I'm going to read and we'll discuss. So one quote, I think the industry is facing the same problem as all other industries, with inflation and rising costs of game development. And it's been hard to increase pricing in premium PC console. The pricing of those products has been the same for many years, which means the margin to succeed is less. And on top of that, there is a higher cost of capital. Ultimately, when you make big investments or games, you need to play with teams you are very confident in, or your IPs, or with IPs you own or control, and have the full financial income. On top of that, the consumers have more content than ever to choose from. They love to engage in established IPs they've been playing before, which means it's harder to have them trying out new things or new IPs. It's just something we're all facing. It's a reality in which we have been adapting over the past year and will continue to adapt to that reality. And quote, on the possibilities of lowering costs rather than rising prices, Wingefors said, quote, lowering costs is a topic with my management. It's very interesting, but it's a bit sensitive to give color around it. I just believe there are consumers willing to engage in those amazing RPGs and other single player games, and ultimately they are willing to spend money on them. Do you increase pricing or do you make them shorter? I think there are ways. I think it would be very sad if everything just became big multiplayer in-game monetization titles. There are millions of consumers willing to engage more in classic games, end quote. Okay, so those two quotes. The first one had a lot of interesting stuff in it. Second one was pure Sarah Bond word salad. But yeah, do we have any thoughts right off the top? There's a few things that I would like to discuss, but yeah, you guys go first, please.
No. No. I'm trying to figure out what I want to say regarding either one, but usually what comes to me is what we speak about, like
sure,
last, the latter. And I think people are kind of, we have a generation now that have kind of grown up on several games that have become staples throughout their entire lives. Minecraft is one, Call of Duty is another, Fortnite is arguably the newer one. And those are all games that have a somewhat addictive nature. They feed into, the serotonin of getting into something for 10 to 20 minutes and then popping right back out. Stop at any point. Whereas we have a lot of newer games, these AAA titles that keep trying to grasp these cinematic ventures, something you have to sit down, you have to play for, something you have to kind of carve out your own time to play rather than just popping in for 10, 15 minutes and then popping out. And I think with media, how much TV we have, how much video games we have, it's tougher for the average person to try to create the time to play those things. And I think that's a little bit, I think that's why it's so difficult to have them try new IPs. With that being said, though, I think people want to try new IPs.
Yes.
and I think that's more important than anything that I said previously. It's just we are not getting what we want for these games, which for a lot of people, for me specifically, I would love to have shorter games.
Yeah.
I would love to have games that have a more refined experience for the money I pay. That part for me personally is not too much. As long as I get enjoyment of it, it's fine. But like Princess Peach Showtime, very fun game, very good, $60, 8 hours long. But it's a quality title. And I don't think it took Nintendo very much to make that game. And I think that, talked about earlier, Vampire Survivors obviously is Vampire Survivors is built off the back of several other games. $5. I've bought it 4 or 5 times already, like on every console, because it is either so good or, and I know that game has an addictive nature as well. Hades 2 is $30, and that just came out. I know there's another game that's No Rest for the Wicked is like $30, $40. Obviously Helldivers 2 is $40. There are people who want to try new IPs. They just don't want to pay $70 for it, especially if you tried to tack on games with bells and whistles. I wouldn't call them bells and whistles, but if you microtransactions, DLCs, battle passes, stuff like that.
Sure.
We don't want those anymore. And we don't want to wait 3 to 7 years for games anymore. Because we don't need these details. We don't need to, you probably have seen it if you happen to have logged on to Twitter at any point, but there was this like 4x4 grid of like which graphics were better. And it was like the eyeball of like Senua from Hellblade, Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, and like 2 other games.
I feel like I would hate that.
Yeah, they were like, well, which game did it best? And it's like, well, why the fuck does that matter, man? Like there's been no point in any of those games that I've played. I haven't played Hellblade, but I have never went into photo mode or into the game itself and zoomed in on my character to look at them, because that's not what I'm there for.
Yeah, that's why I don't go on Twitter, because I would see that and my heart would explode.
but that is what the higher ups are perceived as. Yes,
that's what the Strauss Zelnicks of the world,
yes.
because they're out of touch, and that's all they can, because they don't. Yeah, they don't think in very nuanced terms. I don't know, does number go up? Well, do that. That's basically like the extent of their thought process. But this interview brought a lot of thoughts to my head, because one, I disagreed with this idea that I don't think it's necessarily harder to get people to play new IPs. I think you just have to I think you just have to adjust your expectations. Not every new IP is going to sell like Starfield. But Starfield is an example of a new IP that people were extremely excited for. Now, we can talk about the quality of Starfield all we want, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, it was a famous studio that said, we're going to do a new thing. Back in 2015, CD Projekt Red said, we're doing a game called Cyberpunk. And that created a resurgence in cyberpunk as a genre. It doesn't mean that every single game that came out that was a cyberpunk game since Cyberpunk 2077's first announcement was directly inspired by 2077, but that made cyberpunk that went from a genre that was like Deus Ex and maybe a few other things to a genre that was what's the word I'm looking for, where it's everywhere, saturated, right? And I think it's large part because of Cyberpunk 2077, which was a new video game IP at least. So it's like I reject this idea that it's harder to get consumers to buy or play new IPs. I think if you look at Sony's every time Sony released an exclusive the past 7 years, it sold like hotcakes. Horizon was super successful when it first launched. Ghost of Tsushima was super successful, right? So I don't know. But I think that conversation is couched in a few other like caveats, I guess, because numbers that I would be interested in is like, if we were to compare sales of Starfield, let's say, to sales of Oblivion or Morrowind. Now, Starfield's going to have more because more people play games today, right?
Right.
But if we were to somehow normalize that and average it out and try to come to like some kind of figure that shows how big of a deal that game was on its market relative to its time, and then be able to compare that, almost like batting averages or something like that, right? So because I had this idea that maybe part of the issue is that we're seeing, I think, sort of a stratification in the games industry. At one point, I think we had a circle that was fairly aligned, and everybody that played Destiny played Witcher 3. It was all in this like bubble, right? Yeah. But with so many live service games, with esports, with Twitch, I think that bubble has begun to split apart, like mitosis or something, right? And on one end, you have people that they play their 3 games, their Fortnites, their Roblox, whatever, and there's different age demographics there. There's different things that go into that.
Yeah.
And on the other end, you have sort of the more traditional premium gamers, the people that like buy the big games or whatever, right? These are the people that played, I don't know, Morrowind and then Skyrim or an Oblivion and the Fallout games and the big AAA games. And they played the AA games as well. Yeah. But it's like they jumped to different stuff. It was like every year they were excited for the new thing, as opposed to the people that just play Counter-Strike, right? But the issue is that I think there are people in the industry that are still viewing that maybe as a single market.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is anymore. And they're basing their economics and their strategy based on a faulty idea that it is one market. And I just don't think... I think we have to maybe stop thinking like that. Yeah. Because you're not gonna... I don't know.
Well, it's the same argument that's going on with... and I don't know if you probably haven't seen it, but Furiosa, the new Mad Max film.
I heard it's good, but it did not do well.
Right. But there's a discussion being made that it's... Sure, it may be good, but what if it's a movie people just don't want to see? Because that is a possibility. Like, Ghost of Tsushima, excellent game. People don't want to play it. Like Death Stranding, like I could tell as many people as I want how much, like, I think it's a good game, but people just aren't interested in, in that type of game, because maybe they don't have the patience, maybe they don't have the time, maybe they don't like that style of gameplay. So it is, you're correct. You can't capture everyone, so capture who you can. I meant that was coming out as like a, negative, like focus on them only. But you need to stop looking at like everyone as a concentrated like thing and kind of focus on. I mean, Silent Hill 2. Not everybody's gonna play it when it comes out. There's gonna be a lot of people excited, but how much more money on top of that would you get by just re-releasing
the original
a collection of some sort?
Like that. Well, I think the remake's a bigger deal because
Yes.
And I'm not poo-pooing your thought. I think you're accurate, but like HD remasters and stuff like that are usually like, oh, that, like it's usually the people that get really into that are the people that were already playing their old copy of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's nice to have, the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, or something like that. But with the remake, it's like I think there's more eyes on it because
it's prettier, it's updated.
It's prettier, and they have a different camera angle that they're trying. They're going third person as far as I've been able to tell, and then there's people that are like, there's going to be differences. There's going to be a conversation. How did you change it? Did you stay faithful? Yada yada yada. Right. So there's that angle as well that I think brings in people. But I think that's another good example that I was trying to say earlier is like if we were to compare. I think more people are going to buy the Silent Hill remake during its opening week than bought Silent Hill 2.
Yes.
Even relative to their times. Because obviously that's true because the market is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you somehow normalize that, games are just more popular. There are more people that are buying the big games, right?
Yes, always will be.
That is a theory that I have. I don't know if it's correct. It feels like it's correct, though. Every single Resident Evil tops the previous one now,
oh yeah, it does.
Stuff like that. Same thing with just like I said, same thing with PlayStation exclusives. Do we know if Dragon's Dogma 2 did better than the first one?
It did. It is doing better than the first one.
Okay, so there's like another example.
Yeah.
Because people are online, games are a bigger deal, right? Discussion's always happening, so there's just more people to buy.
Yeah.
And kids that were playing games in 2009 are now grown up and they have more discretionary income.
We also have, of course, something we didn't have 20 years ago, and that was Twitch and YouTube.
Yes.
Word of mouth is bigger. Word of mouth is faster.
So you learn about stuff way faster. Yeah. So I'm just back to the original point here. When we talk about like the difficulty of getting people to play new IPs, I just think it's over exaggerated.
Oh yes.
Because if you set your target correctly, if you set a correct budget, if you don't, I don't know, try to set the world on fire and you realistically approach your market, I don't think it's as difficult as some of these CEOs make it out to be.
Right.
That we can't do anything about the kids playing Fortnite, so all hell break loose. We're all going to die. Sky is falling. It's like, no. Yes, there are a lot of people that play 1 or 2 or 3 live service games, but there's still a sizable market out there that you can capture. It doesn't mean every game's going to be a hit.
Right.
You're going to have your Immortals of Avenum. You're going to have your Alone in the Darks. Like that's gonna happen, in another year maybe Alone in the Dark comes out and a bunch of people play it. I think it got okay reviews. I haven't played it. It's on my radar.
Mine too.
But that's like another example. Yes, there will be times where you do that and it's not going to work out. It probably should have for Alone in the Dark, because I think if you're looking at that IP and you've seen everything that Resident Evil's done for the past few years, it's like, well, we have this will succeed, right? And it didn't. And I'm sure there's a bunch of complicated reasons that it didn't. It may just be that people aren't in the mood right now. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't have the same fatalism when it comes to people playing new games that I think some CEOs do, and I think it's over exaggerated. But the other thing is about this like word salad about lowering, hey, how about you lower costs? Well, blah, 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 blah.
Right, yeah, they want to do everything but that.
Yeah, so it's like completely like, how about you lower costs? Well, I don't know, how about you shut the hell up? It's just like there's that scene in The Office where Stanley like, because he's a diabetic, he didn't take his insulin or whatever, he's like, if I don't have a piece of cake soon, I'm gonna die. And Oscar goes, why don't you eat an apple? He goes, why don't you mind your own business? It's just like, okay, so Lars is like, why don't you shut the hell up, kid? But why don't we reduce cost? I think that's a better idea. Alone in the Dark had David Harbour and Jodie Comer, and it's just like, did we need them? I don't know. Every actor should be paid what they're worth.
Sure.
I'm not going to sit here and say you need to find an actor that'll work for $10 and you can kick them out. But actors with bigger names, I assume, are going to cost more. This is a similar thing that I made a video about this with Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk, but so every actor should be paid. I don't know, like Neil Newbon, who played Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3. He's just as talented as David Harbour. He's just not as famous,
Right.
And how much should he be paid? I don't know what's fair, but there are just as many talent. Every single actor, I think Neil Newbon was probably the most famous actor that played one of the companions in Baldur's Gate 3
Yes.
at the time. But all of those actors were like immensely talented.
Yeah,
And they all just all their performances. That's another thing you're gonna see is how good these performances are. They're all supremely talented. So it's like it's not like you have to sign Will Smith to the game because there's only a dozen talented actors out there. You can find extremely good talent, pay them a reasonable wage that's not pennies, and create a product that's really good. You don't have to bring in celebrities. You don't have to bring in actors that are big names that I would assume are going to demand a higher paycheck, which is going to be a strain on a budget. So like there's something obvious right there that, hey, you know what? As cool as it was having Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk, maybe we shouldn't do that. No, maybe CD Projekt Red, they could afford it. It was fine. And they went on with their lives and whatever. I'm not sitting here saying that we shouldn't do it, but I guess that's a consideration I think we should discuss. And if I'm a CEO and people pitch me a game and they're like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to have Brad Pitt play the main character. I'm like, okay, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I love Brad Pitt. He's cool, whatever. But
well, yeah,
like,
the new game coming out, Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, that's it. Oh man, that game looks ridiculously expensive.
It does, yes.
And again, I don't. The number one problem with McConaughey is his taste in college football is atrocious, right?
Yeah.
There are banana peels that have more personality than the University of Texas, okay? Second thing is, it's like, yeah, he's a good actor. He's obviously extremely talented, and he should be paid what he's worth. But if I'm a studio that is pushing out this gigantic, expensive game, do I want the risk of adding on another huge expense that is an actor when I can get other talented actors that are just as good? And does McConaughey walking out on stage during the Game Awards bring that interest? I don't know. I'm like, again, I don't think he does, and it's nothing wrong with him. I just don't. I don't know. I feel like you can find that kind of talent in other places. I don't mean to sound mean. I just think it's correct, I guess.
Yes, no,
you know what I'm saying?
you are correct. I think you are correct in that.
Yeah. So that's another way where we can chop off some budgetary issues there, Lars, and we don't have to have word salad, even though I'm a little guilty of that myself. Okay, is there anything else we want to say about these about Lars, Embracer, anything?
Shorter games.
Oh yeah, that's,
graphics that look less good than
that is another good example.
Yeah, well.
Games do not need to be as long as they are.
No.
What was I? There was a game that I was playing. Oh, Rise of the Ronin. I have not finished.
Oh, right.
It's just way too long. It's a fun game. I enjoyed it, but I got like really far in, and I was like, I'm just ready to move on to other things.
Yeah.
And there's way too many missions where it's like it's the same thing, and it's just that you don't need to make it this long.
Yeah, and I was that was a thought I had, actually. I guess this is a contextual story I have, but I was at Book Off the other day and yesterday, and I was going through the DVD section, this huge aisle of DVDs, and I looked at all these movies, and granted, movies are like hour and a half, 2.5 hours,
Sure.
but I was like, man, these are all great movies. Most of these aren't talked about anymore. Not because they're bad, it's just because the frequency and the amount of it is just so much. And so when you have a packed year like last year, it was like Resident Evil 4, then Final Fantasy 16 after that,
God.
and then
Tears of the
Baldur's
Kingdom.
Gate after that, and then Tears of the Kingdom, and then
Yeah.
and it's like, why you are creating fights with everyone else.
Yeah, it's almost like you don't want to compete, but you're letting your games get so big that they're competing because you're making them so big.
Right.
So you move them to May to avoid the game releasing in August, but people are still playing it by then.
Yeah.
So it's like
and it's funny because there's that same thought process is in like Genshin Impact. Like when a new character gets announced, you will have like just a thread of people just being like that, like whatever new character is out that month, they're just like, who's this kid? I'm waiting for that person, And so when you have so many games that get released so frequently, especially look at the new release list on Steam, like every 2-3 days, why should I care about your game compared to somebody else's? And that's where that like thought process of I just don't want to play this game right now, or like maybe I'll hold off on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that came out 3 months ago because I'm too busy.
Oh my god!
Which I'm too busy dealing with Rise of the Ronin or Stellar Blade or you know all these other games, and it's and
long games are not necessarily. I don't think they're bad intrinsically.
No.
I just think if we're in panic mode because of budgets, there's another way we could chomp down on game time, and we'll be okay.
Yeah.
People will still be excited. There will be people on Twitter that say the game's on 100 hours, gaming's dead. Like, ignore those people. Like, when I always use this example when Outer Worlds was announced, and they were like, you can finish the story in 20 hours. There was not torches and pitchforks. Everybody was like, that's great. And that was the end of the discussion, because people didn't need another 100. And if you did the side quest stuff, you could get 50, 60 hours out of Outer Worlds. But if you did the main story, 20 hours, in and out, Morty, quick adventure, in and out, right? So it's like, I don't know. But I think the level of conversation we're having is just, it's not happening at the executive level of a lot of these companies, mainly because they're trying to figure out if they can lob off another arm of their company so they can save on the back end and tell their investors they had a profitable quarter, some bullshit like that.
Speaking of lobbing off some limbs, Take-Two apparently will shutter or sell Private Division. This was first reported by IGN's Rebecca Valentine. The closures of Intercept Games and Roll7, which was reported but never made official, are imminent. What's new about this is that Take-Two wants to offload Private Division or close it. According to IGN, Private Division employees were told in February to expect layoffs, but not told when, how many, or why. Then, at the end of April, Private Division employees were told by management that Take-Two would no longer be supporting Private Division, at which time almost all of the staff were laid off. A small crew remains at Private Division supporting current publishing deals. Take-Two apparently has interest from a private equity firm for Private Division, and those two conversations are being facilitated in part with connections to Moon Studios leadership. Back in 2022, VentureBeat reported oppressive working conditions, and a few sources have expressed anxiety at the possibility of working for Moon Studios. And we are now reading from the story. Quote, all those I spoke to for this story expressed frustration at Take-Two leadership for alleged mismanagement of the label and called out Chief Strategy Officer and Private Division Head Michael Waros for poor leadership. Sorry for butchering that name if I did. Sources say the label was often saddled with unreasonable sales targets and pressured to release games before they were ready, with Kerbal Space Program 2 being a notable recent example. And yet all of those I spoke to shared feelings of sadness surrounding the fate of Private Division, citing the team's sincere mission to help smaller independent studios, especially those that were newer and less established, end quote.
Yeah, so Private Division was set up specifically to do AA games. And I think their first big game was Outer Worlds. Yeah. So it's like we have it again. We have an industry that's constantly panicking about how expensive games are and how prices are rising and what are we going to do? We have to, sacrifice the QA staff to the video game gods so we can make money because we're going to shut down. And we have a label here that was set up to do AA games.
Just that, yeah.
And now you're shutting them down. And it's like, why? Are you really going to tell me that it's financially unsustainable to have a smaller label publishing smaller games out there? I don't know, especially when I think what has happened is you have an overcorrection because of the pandemic. You had a bunch of investment that you probably shouldn't have made during the pandemic. The other thing is with Take-Two, they push back Grand Theft Auto 6. So that has created a valley where they don't have a lot going on that I think is probably fine, but in their minds, it's panic time. So they have to figure out how to make a bridge between now and Grand Theft Auto 6. Because way too much is now relying on Grand Theft Auto 6. God forbid that game does not sell a gajillion copies, because if it doesn't meet their goals by 1%, it's going to be a failure. And it's so annoying to me that so much is riding on that. Way too much is riding on Grand Theft Auto 6, and it's all self-created. But Yeah, so sell division or sell private division. You do not need to close it.
Right.
I feel like it's done a good job publishing nice games. I don't know about the mismanagement there. That sucks. I would hope that it gets fixed. It sounds like most employees are gone now, so maybe it's a
Right.
moot point. But like, if you can sell it off and give it to somebody else, I don't know, maybe do that. But
Yeah.
but the problem there is if you sell it off, that doesn't guarantee that the person that gets it isn't going to close it in a year anyway.
Of
if
course.
we've learned anything from Embracer, so
Which also really sucks because Private Division, especially in the last, since their inception, has pretty much made a name for itself.
Yes.
And they have become a bigger type of studio, pretty much along the lines of what Devolver Digital has done. And it really sucks to hear this news.
Yeah. And I'm gonna hazard a guess that it is completely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and you know what? I understand Strauss Zelnick has certain responsibilities, but I don't know. When it comes to people's livelihoods and their jobs and stuff like that, if I were ever in that position, I hope that I would just have the courage to say what we're gonna do and not be like coy and I don't know, try to get out of it like you're being sold a boring energy bar at a GNC somewhere.
Right.
So it's just like, can we just say what we're gonna do, Strauss? We don't have to be all cute and like, hey, we're not shutting down these studios that we're definitely
Right.
shutting down. Anyway, okay.
I would much rather them be upfront about what they're doing than kind of beating around the bush. Because in some, I know I'm being a little like positive on it, but in some way, shape, or form, I feel like that is more of taking accountability for something than not.
Yeah. And at least
even though they aren't, they should be fired.
or at least if you're not going to be transparent with the public, be transparent with employees.
Right.
Give them time to figure out what they're going to do. Then say there's going to be layoffs, and then shut up, and then lay off the whole studio, suddenly.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's going to be layoffs and laying off the whole studio. There is an ocean of difference between those two things, right? So it's like maybe just do a little bit more fair warning. I don't know, if you have to do this stuff, give more time, and whatever financial reasons you have for not doing that, get the fuck over it and just do it anyway, I guess. Okay. Connor, is there anything you wanted to say? I'm sorry.
For companies that are like these large developers that are having issues with like budgeting and everything like that, there's a real simple way, one quick trick that CEOs hate to save a lot of money for your company. That's cutting CEO pay.
Yeah, that is also very true.
It's amazing how much money you could save and like put back into your budgets for your games and not be so stressed about it.
Yeah, I am curious, like, what if we were to give it a percentage? What percentage is Strauss Zelnick responsible for the creative side of GTA 6? Is there anything
I
there
would
he has
venture
done?
lower than 5%.
Like, even 5% sounds high to me.
and
considering how many
that's I'm
people
being
are
very
working on
generous
that
with
game.
5.
But like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he walked into the Hauser Bros one day and was like, I have an idea. What if Arthur gets sick one and falls off his horse? And they were like, brilliant, Strauss. And he said that while he was doing like 18,000 sit-ups. That was the scenario. Maybe he does that.
18,000 sit-ups. Huh?
Yeah, he can do it pretty quick. Strauss Zelnick is the sucky Chris Traeger for all you Parks and Rec fans out there. If there were like how there's like a Mirrorverse in Star Trek and there's like the evil Spock.
Yeah.
Well, the Mirrorverse Strauss Zelnick is we're in the Mirrorverse Strauss Zelnick, but in like the good universe, Strauss Zelnick is Chris Traeger and he's just working for the Parks and Rec department in Michigan somewhere. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes. We gotta.
Oh, are you gonna read this one?
Yeah, I can
Okay,
read this one.
you take it. You take it.
We have a update on the Neil Druckmann Sony situation from last week. We discussed a partially unhinged Neil Druckmann interview. I'll read that word for word. Now that interview is gone from Sony's website, replaced with this statement, quote, in re-reviewing our oh my god sorry insinuates they didn't review it the first time. In re-reviewing our recent interview with Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann, we have found several significant errors and inaccuracies that don't represent his perspective and values, including topics such as animation, writing, technology, AI, and future projects. We apologize to Neil for misrepresenting his words and for any negative impact this interview might have caused him and his team. In coordination with Naughty Dog and Sony Interactive Entertainment, we have removed the interview.
Yeah, and that is the statement in full. So
several significant errors is a really fancy way of saying we lied.
Yeah. And I love how my favorite part of that is the parenthetical. His perspective and values, including topics such as, it just feels like it goes on forever. Animation, writing, technology, AI, and future projects. I don't know why. It just feels like a parody.
It's the
you can add on sports, claymation, TV shows, Fallout.
It's the disclaimer in every medication commercial.
Exactly. Side effects include headache, nausea, upset stomach, diarrhea, death. It just like goes on
writing,
forever.
technology, AI, future projects.
Yeah, so they made up his entire goddamn interview. Oh man,
I wonder like how much of the interview was Neil Druckmann and how much of the interview was, some creative writer out of,
I have no idea.
Berkeley.
Yeah,
out of Brooklyn. But I don't know why it happened. But Sony, we just don't do it, man. Why did you? Come on. No one cares about this interview anyway. Like, just have Jim Ryan say this on a stream somewhere, and it has the same amount of like value.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need Neil Druckmann to do it.
I was about to say, if you want Neil Druckmann to give you the answers that like you want, either A, coach him to give those answers, or B, just give him softball questions that he's gonna answer in a positive light.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna hazard another guess here that the thing that he talked about with the Last of Us experience at Universal Studios Florida, Hollywood, whatever, TM, completely made up. Because that was my thing, that I was like, no, we don't want the end goal should not be experiences that titillate all five senses or whatever.
Right.
I just want good video games. God damn it. Can we just have good video games? Please. For the love of all things holy. Okay. So do we, I'll play the tidbit sounder and then we'll talk.
I got 10 seconds to find something.
Okay. You got the sounder. What you have? What if I told you, in this world, there are bits, and there are tids, and Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits. Watch The Matrix again. It's good movies.
It's an excellent movie.
The guy that plays Cypher in The Matrix.
Joe.
You don't know his name.
Yeah, Joe Pantoliano.
You know his name?
Yeah.
He's in The Sopranos.
He's the sheriff in Bad Boys, or he's the captain in Bad Boys.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and he's Matrix.
He plays a incredibly skeevy character in The Sopranos. He is phenomenal actor.
He's in Memento. He's the cop in Memento.
Oh, well, apparently I just don't watch movies.
Apparently. Also, I have hyperfixation on like actors and musicians, and it's not like
you're gifted in that way.
Unfortunately,
see me, I watch a movie.
Not
I watch
in a good
a movie
way.
with Tom Hanks and like Steve Martin and Steve Carell, and 4 seconds later, I'm like, who was in that? Josh Brolin? I don't fucking remember.
Having a hyperfixation on that, I wish it was like math or something.
something useful. I think movies are useful. You're good. What's our goddamn tidbit?
There's still a discussion. I don't know if I did this as a tidbit. I think I did, but there's still a discussion about adding the Waffle House parking lot to Tekken DLC. But Katsuhiro Harada, the director and producer of Tekken 8, every now and again will be like, okay, I keep getting sent videos for like Waffle House like fights, like Waffle House fights, and he's just like, and I get it. I know why you guys want this, but why is the culture like this? Like that's so like this recent. He's now questioning why fights are happening in the Waffle House rather than putting Waffle House.
He's so dumbfounded that he's like, all right, I need to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Here. I was thinking other stores. I think we may have had this conversation.
Yeah.
But like other stores that you could have that. Now the problem with this, if you turn it into like a brand thing, it would suck. You know,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
you need to like set a fight in an IKEA, but think of like a creative way where it's like you start off in the hangar bay area. It's not a hangar bay.
Sure, yeah, no, I know what you mean.
And it just looks generic. You don't know where you are. And then it's like press A to smack him with the Schlitterbund or whatever. You know?
You're
And
right.
You pick him up, you smack him, and then you fly and you land in like the kitchen area, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I'm in an IKEA.
That really works well because IKEA has several floors to it, and
There you go,
the floor
yeah.
breaks in Tekken, so you just
Then you
go
could
to
go
the next
up
one.
and down.
Yeah.
You could, if it was I don't know if Tekken has like a Mortal Kombat type finish hims or whatever.
No,
But like there's meatballs. You could do something with meatballs.
Yeah.
I'm not creative enough.
Like
If
a
I'm Hannibal
friendship or
Buress, you
something.
could just throw 34 meatballs and knock a guy out. You know. Okay, what's next?
So I had another one apparently. So a couple weeks ago, Playdate announced that there was a whole shipment that got stolen from them of Playdate consoles, which is a really neat little handheld with a crank on it, and people have made some really fun looking games on it. That collection of Playdates that were stolen. Well, it was misdelivered to a FedEx or to a construction site by their warehouse. That's how this happened. And then someone took them. Well, last week, May 30th, almost all of them got dumped at a random restaurant. So they got them back.
Uh-huh.
So.
Not for nothing, Tone.
Yeah.
But this crank on the Playdate, it makes for fun games, Tone.
Oh, this is pretty big news. I was saving it for my show this week for Gaming Discourse FM this week. But Jeff Fallen, brother to Tim Fallen. There are three brothers: Tim Fallen, Jeff Fallen, Mike Fallen, I think is the other one. Incredibly prolific in original NES, Commodore 64, Super Nintendo music. Jeff Fallen unfortunately passed away to pancreatic cancer. And he was with his brother Tim. They made a lot of really classic music. So this week's episode will be dedicated to him, and will feature most of the music that Jeff Fallen has created. So that very unfortunate.
Okay, that's all the tidbits.
That's it.
All right. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Go to youtube.com/gamingdiscourse. Do not go to Twitter and Facebook. I mean, if you want, you can, but I don't post because those places give me anxiety and they raise my blood pressure and then I have to go to the doctor. So
Yeah.
Patreon.com/gamingdiscourse. Go there. That lowers my blood pressure. YouTube, if you want me to live, there. I'm going to hang this over our audience's head.
Wow.
If you want me to live, go to youtube.com/gamingdiscourse, patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And we will see you next week.
Stockholm syndrome.